What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy for week 6. Week 5 is in the books. It was actually a pretty good week for fantasy football, though I will say in DFS, and this is going to come up early in the show, a little frustrating. Mainly then when I'm looking at the Millie Maker, the strategy that worked this week is the complete opposite of worked last week. DFS is hard. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy presented by Club Fantasy. This is our weekly DFS show covering the main slate. I am your host, Ryan Weiss. With me, as always, Austin Amendolia. Austin, how are you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm good. The game that's happening right now is really weird. So it's like I kind of wish I was seeing it, but it's the Giants in prime time. I can skip it.
And that's what I was gonna say. And who would have thought that I would have expected this game to be a blowout already? But last I checked, it was 7-3 as we're starting to record. So very different from what we expected. We know we're together for the next 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll go and see what this game looks like at halftime. Something tells me probably not as competitive as what it's looking right now. As I mentioned before, this is our weekly DFS show covering the main slate. And I do like to remind you guys right at the start of the show, you don't just have to talk DFS with us or listen to us talk DFS. You can actually play with us. You'll find links in the description of this video and our 2 DFS articles we put out on the website that have invitations to our groups on FanDuel and on DraftKings. On FanDuel, we run the main slate. On DraftKings, we run the Thursday and the main slate. Little $2 contest. Help you build your bankroll, get to play with some really fun people. And if you win, your name gets announced on the show. Austin, also let them know we have this great Discord going on that you do such a great job with in the DFS.
That is right. You can join us on Discord. The link to join that is in the show description. Whether you're on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, you can come chat with us about DFS and plenty of other things. But the great thing is that if different players get ruled out and we change strategies between when this episode drops and Sunday, we'll talk about it in that channel. And if you post your lineup and you want feedback on it, we're there to talk about it, and we're there to celebrate our victories. And if you drop them in there, we'll also announce them on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Drop them in there. We'll make sure you get some love here. I think that's a great point. If you guys have never tuned into the show, this is one of the only show on Club Fantasy that is not a live show. So the Discord is the best place to ask questions. Me and Austin are both in that Discord. You can just at our names. We will come up and we'll be able to answer anything for you that we said on the show. We'll be able to own up to it if you guys didn't like the answer we gave you. This show is going to cover cash games and GPP. We start with the cash games, except because I'm a degenerate, we also like to start with answers to the test, and that is last week's Millie making lineup. Last week scored 246.82, Austin. That's basically what the week before scored. This roster makes a ton of sense, and I have quite a few things to talk about with this roster. Justin Fields, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Mike Ibuka, Jalen Waddle, Jake Ferguson, Rico Dowdle, and the New Orleans Saints defense. Literally not a surprise in the bunch, Austin, but credit where credit is due. You and I were going back and forth in the GPP section about the right roster construction around quarterback, running back, going no stack because the guy who won the Millie in week 4 went no stack. And you specifically said, Austin, one way to get different would be to pair Justin Fields and Breece Hall. That is exactly what the Millie making lineup did.
Yeah, it really worked out. It's an easy way because people just think like a rushing quarterback and a running back, they're not going to pair well together. It can happen though. It can happen in one game. Of course, if we're trying to play redraft and we're betting on that all season long, it's really hard to bet on that. But for a single game, it can work out, particularly if it just hits the right way. And boy, did it hit for this person.
Yeah. So, Austin, I went back and looked at the show sheet. Normally, I'll put little like our names next to who we said. I'm pretty sure the only names that did not get mentioned on last week's show were Rico Dowdle, which is about to get talked about heavily by you, but that's because the Chuba Hubbard news came out after we recorded this show. And the New Orleans Saints were not on our radar as a defense, though I have to say some of the lineup optimizers that I took a look at, they were in on the New Orleans Saints, so it was not a weird defense to be in on. And then, as I mentioned, the week before, Austin had a single game stack No correlation, really. No heavy stacks. This week does the exact opposite. Heavy Dallas, New York Jets lineup, which made a ton of sense. That was a game we were in on. But then they did 2 game stacks, Tampa Bay, Seattle, Carolina, Miami. It's the opposite, and that's just what is maddening. And it's what you've been telling me for 3 years, why I'm always going to be pulling my hair out chasing this $1 million.
Yeah, I mean, I will say having just focusing on matchups that you really like is going to be the easiest way to hit the ceiling more often than not, because you're reducing the number of variables that you were trying to guess right. And it's one of those things too where I'm like, I really feel you, Ryan, because I had a lineup with Justin Fields and Breece Hall in it. I also had a lineup with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Emeka Egbuka in it. They weren't the same lineup, but at least one of them cashed in tournament, so that was a little bit nice. But that's one of the challenging aspects of the Millie Maker too, is you get those multi entries, and so people are able to get all the different combinations that they want.
Austin, I wanted to ask you a question. So before we get into your debrief, I'll give my quick debrief, but it's actually going to lead into a question. So as everybody knows, if you've watched the show for any period of time, I am not a big DFS player. I study fantasy football. I do rankings. I know what I'm doing with DFS, but I do not commit a large bankroll to it. So every week, though, what I do actually probably is a large bankroll for some people. Let me not degrade anybody's bankroll. I put 1 entry in the Millie Maker contest, and then I enter a single 50-50 or double up to try to win back my entry that I know I'm burning in the Millie Maker. Austin, I have a conundrum. So the contest I've been using, I do the DraftKings Millie Maker, which is $20. I have been using the DraftKings Giant Double Up, which is $25. The scores to cash in that have been outrageous, Austin. I'm talking the scores that you and I normally talk about possibly cashing in the big contest are what it is taking to cash in this double up. Am I in the wrong contest? Should I consider picking 5 random head-to-heads to try to make my money back? Would that be a better use of my money? I felt like the double up was the way to go into a large field, and all I have to do is finish in the top half. I'm a little disheartened after how poor, like my lineup was decent last week, and it was nowhere near the cash line.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of yes and to a lot of what you're asking in that. So let's just start with like the $25 double up. I don't think it's necessarily that contest is harder than the other double ups that you
and I pick it because it's a single entry. We've talked about that before, but that's more for the listeners. So
right, the single entry contest, that's the way to go, because in those multi-entry cash contests you have like the best DFS players in the world just max entering that. For those single entry contests though, I think what's really been happening is the chalk has just really been hitting, and people have been getting more and more sharp over the years with DFS cash. I mean, I'll go ahead and loop some of this into my recap of last week. But like, for example, we talked about Justin Fields on last week, and I can't remember. I don't think last week was the week we recorded on Wednesday, but it was clear to me when I started prepping for the show on Tuesday. I was like, it's Justin Fields this week in cash, and I don't feel like I'm going to waver from that. And I didn't. And he was 80% rostered in that $25 double up. Like, he was by far the top rostered player. And similarly, freaking Rico Dowdle was ridiculous. And he was also very highly rostered. Now, I was not sure that I was not willing to bet on Carolina that way. But because so many people did, and he scored 30 points, then it just pushed the cash line up that much farther.
So I basically feel like we're getting, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is I may be being a little bit too anecdotal with my evidence that it was one bad week and I did pivot off of Dowdle, something I mentioned in the Discord. So
yes. So there's 2 things there. One, exactly what you just said. The point of playing cash is you're looking for season-long success, not just week-to-week success. So over the course of the year, if you're positive, you're doing well in cash contests. Now, the point you brought up about the head-to-head contest, I do mix my cash, like the bankroll that I spend on cash. I do mix it up between the double ups, the big double ups, and the head-to-heads. And the reason for that is I feel like I can fairly consistently hit the cash line in the double ups and double my money that way. But if I don't, let's say I'm just under the cash line, I just beat, in that giant contest that you're referencing, I just beat 1,500 other people, but I didn't win any money.
Yeah.
Well, if I am playing any of those 1,500 people in head-to-head contest, I'm winning money and I'm helping insulate my losses. So one way you could go about it, Ryan, with if you're putting $25 into cash every week, is you could say 10 to 15 of it goes to double ups, and the rest of it
I
goes
like
to
that.
head to heads. So whenever I am doing well in DFS, I have $40 that I put towards cash contest every week. I
Okay.
enter that $25 double up, and then the $15 that I have remaining goes exclusively to head to heads.
Yeah, and if I start to build a better bankroll, I'll look into that if I have more success. One last question. It's been a while since I've had to make this joke. I used to always say we do these shows to make me a better fantasy player. Hopefully this is helping other people as well. I think this is going to be a dumb question, but I think I understand. I'm going to pick one cash lineup and put it into all those contests though, correct? I'm not going to
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
That's my
That's exactly how I do it. Now, I will say, if you go and you start doing the head-to-head contest, there are two ways you can do it. You can go pick other contests. You can go pick your opponent for people who have created their own contest, or you can create your own contest.
Interesting.
And make it a head-to-head, which is what I do. But when you do that, make sure that you limit the amount of times other people can play you to one time.
There you
because
go.
otherwise they can play you an unlimited number of times, and then you can get a really sharp DFS player who will come and just beat up on you.
Just takes my money.
Exactly. And then they can still try and do that, right? They can target you week over week, which sometimes happens. I've had people that I see that have played me multiple times. And if you are always losing to them, you can go block them so that they're not taking your money every time.
I love this. Yeah, this is very good. I think I'm going to try this week. I should have some time on Sunday morning. I think I'm going to try that. So yeah, that's last week's recap. Thank you so much, Austin. Did you want to talk more about Rico Dowdle, or are we good there? So
no, it was mostly just the concept is what we talked about on the show, right?
100%.
We've talked about this multiple times of pick the punt running back, backup running back when they are available.
You just don't expect them to go for 208 yards.
There were so many options last week too, and
Yeah.
I did not expect Rico Dowdle to pull that off. But if I had just said that, oh, the field's going to play Rico Dowdle, I don't care what he does, then I would have ended up just fine.
And see, and I'm glad you said that, because that's not always my mindset. I don't think about the field. I think about, and you kind of said this, I'm not betting on the Panthers that way. And that was my pivot. So I moved Dowdle to one of the other guys, Rashad White, who was still fine, just not Dowdle fine. So that's how it goes down sometimes. All right. We are starting this show off for week 6 in the cash portion of the show. This is Austin's specialty. This is the bankroll builder. We start off with what we call top of the class. These are the expensive players, $8,000 or higher. And I always preface this. We tend to talk in terms of DraftKings pricing, but if they're $8,000 on DraftKings, they're certainly more than that on FanDuel. FanDuel has the bigger budget. Austin, you got two guys in this category, two very familiar names, the chalkiest of chalk as they were.
Yes, these guys are both likely to continue being incredibly highly rostered. It's Puka Nacua, who is $8,700 on DraftKings, $9,800 on FanDuel, and Christian McCaffrey, who's at $8,400 on DraftKings and $9,500 on FanDuel. Now, one quick note about this segment of the show. I usually only pick one player for this portion of the show because it is very challenging often to pay up for two players that are above the 8K range on DraftKings or above the 9K range on FanDuel. However, as we'll talk later, there are some interesting options that have been opened up to us this week because of how DraftKings priced some players. So I think there is a way where you can get both Puka Nacua and Christian McCaffrey in your lineup this week. And for me, they're just both so consistent. They're both scoring 20 to 30 points every week. It's I'm going to play them until I literally cannot make a good lineup without them in it.
Yep, I agree wholeheartedly. For our lineup that we're going to announce later on in the show, I tried to get them both in, but I have to do some weird things for this show lineup. But for my cash lineup, I fully intend on having them both in. And I think this might sound weird, Austin, but I think that also gives us the ability, if you can find a way to build a good lineup with both, I think that's getting different in cash, because most people are going to see it as an either or.
Yes, and actually, I think we might allude to that as we get to the tournament section as well, because I agree it's going to be hard to do both, and people may not feel comfortable doing it.
I love it. Moving on, we got the band nerds, $6,000 to $8,000 over there on FanDuel. Our joke here is that they spend a little bit too much time practicing their instrument. They're not ready to be top of the class. Austin, you got two more players here for us, both running backs.
Yes, both running backs and both with really great matchups. Now, one thing I do want to name here, I picked these players because I wanted us to have this category on the show this week.
Ooh.
Because I am playing Christian McCaffrey and Puka
You're
Nacua,
not
or
getting these
currently
guys
planning
in.
to, this tier of price range is actually really hard to fit in. So I have a little bit more of a stars and scrubs approach happening this week. A lot of players in the 5K range that we'll talk about in a moment that I am fitting into my roster to get both Nacua and McCaffrey. But if I end up pivoting off of one of those cheaper guys, and I'll talk about some scenarios where that might happen. The two running backs that are really interesting this week are both Kyron Williams and Josh Jacobs. Kyron Williams is cheaper. He's $6,300 on DraftKings, $8,400 on FanDuel. And Josh Jacobs, he's at $7,300 on DraftKings, $8,700 on FanDuel. Both of these guys, they have the two best matchups for running backs this week. Cincinnati's allowing the most points. That's who Green Bay plays. So Josh Jacobs gets the best matchup this week. And Kyron Williams going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore has been hot garbage against running backs this year. We'll also talk about him in the tournament spot because I think there's an interesting way to play this depending on what we get in the injury reports. But it's all to say, I think if you are to pivot off of Christian McCaffrey, these are two of the guys to look at as really good ceiling plays. And I think in particular, noticing the pricing differences between the two websites is really key here because Kyron Williams and Josh Jacobs, you got to scroll a little bit to get to them on DraftKings, but they are two of the top 4 priced running backs on FanDuel, which I think is because FanDuel is like they're going to score touchdowns. And just so you know, touchdowns do indeed still matter on DraftKings. And so you might want to play one of these guys if you decide not to play McCaffrey.
So, Austin, these were two guys I consider for my GPP section because I do think they have the biggest pop week, but obviously they may also be chalky-ish. But I actually had a whole paragraph written for Kyron Williams, and then I pivoted off him altogether. But the thing I wanted to bring up that drove me nuts is something you alluded to. The price difference between Jacobs to Kyron. And again, this is probably because Kyron isn't catching a lot of passes, but neither is Jacobs. A $1,000 difference on DraftKings for two that are essentially the same ranked running back going up against essentially the same bad defenses. I think Kyron Williams is a value of all values on DraftKings right now.
Yeah, I think so too. And again, we will talk about him in the tournament section for that very reason.
And then this is me being the nerd that I need to be sometimes. DraftKings has a $50,000 salary. FanDuel has a $60,000 salary. What that tells me, Austin, is there should be a 20% bump in player salary. Josh Jacobs is a perfect example. It is almost exactly a 20% bump from 73 to 87. Kyron Williams going from 63 to 74 tells me that FanDuel is way sharper when it comes to the running back pricing this week.
Yeah, he is $2,100 more on FanDuel, up at $8,400 there. It feels way too large of a discrepancy to me between the two sites for Kyron Williams.
Yeah, those were just two things. I know we didn't want to spend a ton of time on that section, but those were just two things that happened to fall perfectly. When I was looking at my players, you had your two guys in there, and I was fine to overlap. Like I was ready to go in on Kyron Williams, but I found a guy I like better. That's a little bit. I think he's actually more expensive, but I think there's some get different options there. But it was a fun section to talk about that stuff. Moving on, we're looking at the 4,000 to 6,000 mid-tier players, the value plays, the bookworms, as we like to call them. And Austin, this is obviously a hardy bunch for you because if you're paying up, you need to get that value somewhere else.
Yeah, this is where I'm getting the bulk of my lineup together this week. Now, let's start with quarterback because this is where I think we have some options that open us up to play both Puka Nacua and Christian McCaffrey. Dillon Gabriel is only $4,400 on DraftKings. He is $6,400 on FanDuel, which still isn't too bad over there. He played pretty well in his first game as a starting quarterback, so well that the Cleveland Browns were like, you know what? We don't need Joe Flacco anymore.
Flacco's gone.
He can go try and make the Cincinnati Bengals better, which tells you also how much confidence they have in Joe Flacco that they were like, yeah, you go play for the Bengals. We'll see you later this year.
Our division rival.
But the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've been a little soft against opposing quarterbacks. I mean, their defense has gotten a little bit better in recent weeks, and they are coming off a bye week. So there's some flags there. Like I am a little weary of teams coming off of bye and like assuming that they're going to perform the same way that they did before the bye week.
Yeah.
That said, though, Dylan Gabriel does not have to do that much to hit this price point. If he gets 13.2 points, he has paid off his salary, and he allows you to pay up for the two best players in DFS. So I will be looking his direction. There's a chance where I pivot off of him and I decide, it's too risky. But honestly, as it stands, like I think he's going to be the free square this week, like Justin Fields was last week.
Really? That's a big statement to end that on. I was not planning to talk much more about this. I would not consider Gabriel a free square. I was going to ask you about the risk factor, but the fact that what Puka and Christian McCaffrey bring to the table mitigates that risk a little bit. I'm going to bring up my GPP quarterback because he is equally as cheap. Do you see Bryce Young as more or less risky here for $400 extra?
I do not. I think it's like, I feel like Bryce Young is also going to be really popular.
Okay.
I think it's really like, it gets really fine margins at that point because it's really hard to get up to both Nakua and McCaffrey. So I could see that being the true one of the pivot points is if you want both of those players, you have to go with Dylan Gabriel. But if you are willing to drop down to Josh Jacobs and Kyron Williams, then you get Bryce Young instead. I think that'll be kind of like one of the key decision points that differentiates lineups this week.
I can't wait to see it blow up in my face. All right, you got plenty of other players to talk about here.
Yeah, so I want to shout out the Los Angeles Chargers running backs, primarily Hassan Haskins, who is $5K on DraftKings, $5,600 on FanDuel. We didn't see a ton of opportunity for him and Kamani Vidal towards the end of their game last week after Amarian Hampton went out. But Haskins did have the edge in terms of touches for the little bit of action that they got. And so I think he will be the main running back getting run in this offense. And because he is 5K on DraftKings and $5,600 on FanDuel, he is also enabling me to get up to McCaffrey and Puka Nakua. And I feel like the opportunity there will be enough in a pretty good run offense that he is worth taking a look at. Also, it is a decent matchup for him. Miami has allowed the 5th most points to the running back position so far this year. So I feel fairly comfortable going that direction. But I will say, like, this one feels riskier to me than Dylan Gabriel does. Yeah. And so there is a world where I decide I'm going to pay up for my second running back and then probably like pivot off of McCaffrey and keep Nakua in my lineup.
So yeah, we've been doing the show together for three plus years now, and it's not our nature to disagree very often. I've been having this disagreement with everyone, and now I get to have it on air with you. I think it's Kamani Vidal. And my thought process here is, and I'm not putting either one of these guys in my lineup, let me be very clear, though I am starting Vidal in a couple of leagues this week, just not DFS. My thought process here is Haskins has been on the roster because he can play special teams. Vidal is there to be the runner, and Vidal is demonstrably the better pass catcher. And I think that's going to matter at some point. I'm not saying I'm right. I think it's way more a case that both these guys are very mid. But I will say, Austin, in my fab bets this week in redraft, I was betting on Vidal over Haskins. Just my take on the situation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think this is a point. I mean, it's kind of similar to the situation that we were in last week with Amari DiMercado 100%. And Michael Carter. I ended up pivoting off of DiMercado because I was like, you know what? This is too ambiguous. And I got onto Rachaad White. That was my pivot off of him.
And you announced that in the Discord, by the way, folks. He 100% said, I just want everyone to know with the Bucky Irving news, I am pivoting to Rachaad White.
So. Yeah. And so I could see myself ending up in a very similar place this week. It's one of those things that if we get a clear lean, if we get some news that makes it clear that it's going to be one over the other, I would go that direction. But if it remains fairly ambiguous, then I probably will pivot off. It's just to say, though, that there are two cheap running back options, and one of them will probably work out this week.
Yep, keep it rolling in this section.
Yeah, so a couple players that we're going back to. I'll just throw out Chris Olave, Keenan Allen, and Jake Ferguson really quickly. All three of them fit the same category. They've been very consistent in terms of targets this year. Chris Olave got back to double-digit targets last week after a week before where he didn't hit that mark. Jake Ferguson is like ridiculous right now. It's kind of weird. He's the most expensive tight end on FanDuel. So I don't know that I'm playing him on FanDuel because he's been a target hog, but honestly, it might work out. And then Keenan Allen, he just continues to get that volume. And Quentin Johnston is currently questionable, has a questionable tag. So if for some reason he's not able to play, it just makes Allen that much better of a play.
Absolutely.
The last player I have for this section, and this is really where it will determine how I handle the Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nacua situation. Kendrick Bourne at 5K is really interesting if Juwan Jennings and or Ricky Pearsall are out. With them out of the lineup, he got a ton of volume from Mac Jones last week. And I don't see any reason why that would change if they're out of the lineup. So this is one where I'll be checking the injury reports really closely. If for some reason one or both of Jennings and Pearsall play, then I will not be playing Kendrick Bourne at all. And that'll be the point where I look to go up at receiver, find someone probably more in the 6K range, and drop down from Christian McCaffrey to probably Kyren Williams or maybe Josh Jacobs, depending on how the pricing works out. But more than likely than not, it would be Kyren Williams.
In cash, though, you are okay to go Bourne and CMC to make that lineup work?
I feel comfortable with it because I feel like they both I feel like they can both get there. They both will get enough volume that it doesn't bother me.
Perfect. And we wrap this category up as we always do. The punt plays less than $4,000. Sometimes there's a few guys here. Sometimes there's only one. Sometimes it's a defense. C's get degrees, and it's a defense for us this week, Austin.
It is a defense because, that's just the way it is this week.
Well, you got to punt if you're getting Puka Nacua and CMC in your lineup.
That is true. I do need to punt this week. And so I'm going with the Tennessee Titans, who are playing the Las Vegas Raiders. It's really that, the Raiders, they've had not a great offensive line, and Geno Smith's making mistakes. Like, it's been kind of messy and gross over there, and it's cheap enough on DraftKings that I'm like, okay, like there's not like a bunch of defenses this week that I'm like, oh, this is a clear smash play. And so to me, I'm like, you could just punt defense and it's probably not going to impact you too much this week. And so that's kind of my take with Tennessee. I'm trying to do whatever I can to keep both Christian McCaffrey and Puka Nacua in my lineup. And if I have to, get 2 points from the Tennessee Titans defense to get there, I think that's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think that's such a great call. I build the stream of the week list here at Club Fantasy every week, and Tennessee and the Raiders gave me the largest conundrum this week because they're both terrible defenses inherently, but then they're playing two of the best offenses for defense each other. So like that game should be the ugliest 6 turnover game ever. But for what you're talking about and something you say every week, your defense isn't going to kill you in cash. You just need to start one. Why not start a bad one who happens to be facing a team that will give up sacks and that will turn the ball over? I think it's a great play to attack that matchup this week. I don't know if Tennessee's cheaper than the Raiders, but I wouldn't even be mad at looking at the Raiders. They're awful, but Max Crosby might get 4 sacks this game. So.
I did think about that too. I think the Raiders are a totally fine option as well.
There you go. Like it's in real fantasy football, it is the worst possible matchup to start just about anyone on defense. But for our purposes in cash, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, folks, that is going to wrap up the cash portion of the show. And another reminder that you can play DFS with us, both on DraftKings and FanDuel. Links in the description of this video and on the articles we put out on the website, clubfantasyffl.com. $2 contests we run every week. They're not even really filling up right now. So if you want to come in, win yourself a little bit of money, have a good time, maybe hear your name announced on the show, make sure you look out for those. Also, check the link for the Discord in the description of this video. As I mentioned, Austin's giving advice right up until game time when he is doing pivots, when better plays are making themselves known. And he even shows you his cash lineup for the week because he doesn't think you're going to seek him out and you don't want to tie him. So you're not going to play the same lineup as him. And now we move on to my favorite portion of the show, the GPP, the one that I'm hoping someday is going to make me a millionaire so I can pay Austin to do this show with me every Thursday night. Austin, we break this one down by sections. We start off with the quarterback. You got a couple of plays for us.
Yeah. So first off, I'm going back the same direction that I went last week with Justin Herbert, who is $6,300 on DraftKings. He is $8,500 on FanDuel. He is, I believe, the most expensive quarterback on FanDuel. And if not, he's like the second most expensive quarterback on FanDuel, which just was bonkers to me. The fact that was the case. He's the second most expensive behind them, only Lamar Jackson,
who may not even play.
who may not even play. So de facto, the most expensive.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Miami, so we're getting to the point of the season now officially where you can I'm starting to remove week 1 from my analysis when I'm looking at this, because if you look season long, including week 1, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Miami Dolphins. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong position right now, so that's part of the why. The Miami Dolphins are the 3rd best matchup for quarterbacks. If you take out week 1, they're now the 2nd best.
Yeah, which was a month ago, people. It's time to forget about those things.
So. Exactly. So they've been making their way up. But the thing that actually really interests me about this is that it's a game that I think is going to go overlooked purely because the over underline is not exciting. It's 44.5 points. That's not a lot. But I'm like, these offenses could easily hit the over. Like both of these offenses could score 28 points in a game. Like I know Miami has struggled to start the season, but they still have that explosive ability that I'm like, this could be back and forth. This could be a sneaky matchup that gets overlooked. And I feel like Justin Herbert has been playing so well, and the passing game has been so important, especially the flip side of what we were talking about with Hassan Haskins and Kamani Vidal. They don't have like really elite running back talent right now. They're going to need to pass the ball. And so I think it's a really great week to bet on Justin Herbert for that reason.
I think that excellent call. I have nothing to add to that. We talked a lot about Herbert last week, and he was rather pedestrian, but for the most part, he got the job done. He was a better cash play than he was GPP play, it felt like. So
yes, that is true. And if you're playing in smaller tournaments, like that's okay. So
absolutely.
Like I had a
our perspective on GPP is a little different even when we get to this section.
So. Yeah. Like I played in a hundo contest last week, and I did cash. I placed 20th out of 100.
Yeah.
And I had Daniel Jones at quarterback. He didn't light the world on fire. No, so like for those type of contests in particular, Justin Herbert can totally get you there. But I think he also has a decent amount of ceiling. The other quarterback I want to shout out here is that if Lamar Jackson does end up playing, Matthew Stafford is a really great option. He's $6,400 on DraftKings, $7,700 on FanDuel. The reason I qualify that on depending on what Lamar Jackson does is when the Rams have been pushed this year, they have dominated through the air, and Matthew Stafford has really lit the world on fire, especially these past 2 weeks when he's been in those close games. If Lamar Jackson does not play, I'm less interested in this because I think that they just get ahead and they roll. But I do love the idea of saying, let's flip the script. If Lamar Jackson does play, people are going to be like, oh, you get to play Jackson this week. I'm going to be like, I'm going to play Matthew Stafford and see how that one
100%, goes. 100%. You need it to stay a game. That makes so much sense because that Baltimore defense is terrible. But there's a chance the Rams give the ball to Kyron Williams the whole third quarter and Blake Corum the whole fourth quarter if they're running away with this game. So
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. For me, and I already alluded to this earlier in the show, and you did say something that concerned me because you said you mentioned he might be chalk. I don't know if you meant strictly in on cash. I'm looking at Bryce Young mainly because he is dirt cheap and there are some expensive options I like this week. 4,800 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel. I'm betting, Austin, that people are afraid. He went 198-2 last week against a beatable team. It was Miami last week. This week, he gets Dallas, and they've just been terrible against quarterbacks. Justin Fields just went for 283 yards and 2 touchdowns against them. Actually had to use his arm. It was mostly garbage time, but we've seen the Panthers get it done in garbage time. I do think Young, 303, is a possibility for him. And that's the kind of thing I want at quarterback when I'm looking at this kind of tournament.
Yeah, well, and one thing that we should throw out there about about the Panthers is their matchup. Like we've talked about this, the Cowboys have been giving up so many points to the quarterback position, but it's gotten even worse. So if you look season long, they've given up 28.7 points per game to the quarterback position. If you take out week 1 and just look for what's happened since week 2, it's moved up to 29.1 points. But what's even more important is they are giving up nearly 5 points per game more than the second best matchup for quarterbacks. They are like far and away the best matchup for quarterbacks. By the way, like the difference between Dallas at 1 and Miami at 2 for points allowed to the quarterback is the same as the difference between Miami at 2 and Green Bay at 14. Like that is like what we're talking about in terms of the gap here. And so I do like it in terms of the matchup. Now, I agree with you that people are going to be afraid to click the button for Bryce Young. And so I think this is a good week to like pick the Carolina side to stack on. And the other thing is, I don't know if he'll get to play this week and how many snaps he'll have this week, but Jalen Coker is coming back. And
off the IR.
Bryce Young loved Jalen Coker
Loves
last
him.
year, loved targeting him. And I think Coker was more of a reliable catcher than like Xavier Legette, for example. So I could see this offense getting rolling a little bit this week.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And then on the other side of it, I don't know that he's even getting mentioned on the show sheet this week, but Rico Dowdle revenge game. So that could be interesting on a bring back on that, just as another thought if you want to stack up in that game. Austin, but looking at our running backs, Rico Dowdle is not being mentioned because you're going to bring back two guys you've already kind of talked about.
Yeah, so it is funny. It's not often that my cash running backs are also my GPP running backs, but I think low key, people are not going to want to play Christian McCaffrey in tournament settings this week. I think he is going to be too priced up.
He's getting to that price point.
He's getting to that price point, and I think there's this little bug in everybody's ear that still feels like Tampa Bay is a really good run defense. And it's not, they're not wrong. Like Tampa Bay has done good at defending the run this year, but I could see that getting McCaffrey compressed down. And here's the thing. McCaffrey's been scoring like 25 to 30 points a game, and he has not yet had a multi-touchdown game. That is like his like bread and butter is scoring multiple touchdowns in a game. He also hasn't had a rushing touchdown yet. He's only had receiving touchdowns. So there's part of me that's like, okay, he's scoring 25 points with only scoring one touchdown max per game. If we get like a random 3 touchdown Christian McCaffrey game, yeah, you're going to be like, wow, why? I'm dumb for thinking that $8,500 was too expensive for Christian McCaffrey.
I'm nothing to add. You're absolutely right. He's the safest floor in fantasy. We talk about this all the time. In these big tournaments, you want a 3x. He is still at 8,400. He is still averaging 3x. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's a wild time. And then to my point about if Lamar Jackson plays, go to Matt Stafford. Also go to Kyren Williams, because I think that like the pass game is like the thing that is exciting to bet on in LA right now with Puka Nacua. And so people are going to want to play him. I think like he'll be like 30% rostered in tournament settings. And I could see as a result, Kyren Williams getting overlooked. Now, because of that, I will also say you may want to try and play both of them and see does Puka Nacua get there on volume throughout the course of a game, score a couple touchdowns early, and then Kyren Williams gets the volume in the third, fourth quarter. So I don't mind playing both, but I like also playing Kyren Williams to say, okay, what if like the pass game doesn't hit this game and Williams ends up being the piece that you need?
Yep. As I mentioned, you've mentioned a lot of the players I liked, and Kyren and Josh Jacobs were the two I was intending to go to in this position. But there is another player that stands out to me based on the matchup, and that is Ashton Genty. He's moderately priced enough this week, Austin, that I think people might be scared off of him because of how average he was last week. But 2 weeks ago, the man dropped 3 touchdowns, and now you're getting a team that is giving up the most running back touchdowns this season in Tennessee and the most fantasy points to running backs over the last 3 games. I do the same thing as you, where I start to eliminate some games. Tennessee is being gashed by running backs, and I think Ashton Genty did enough last week to scare some people off that his rostership's going to be right around that 8%, where I'm not like overly concerned that he's over rostered. And then the thing that a lot of people will look at last week as a disappointment, he caught 5 balls last week, Austin. This is a part of his game we've been wanting to see, and I feel like now he's getting more involved, especially with Brock Bowers likely to miss again this week.
Yeah, I was going to put Ashton Genty down as one of my running backs, but you got to the show sheet before I did, as often happens.
Yeah.
And so I really like this play as well for every reason you just said. The Seattle Seahawks have been allowing just over 32 points to the running back position since week 2, so it's a great matchup spot for Ashton Genty.
Just want to make sure, because they're playing the Titans, not the
Seahawks. The Titans.
No, you're fine.
You're right.
You gave me a heart attack. I'm like, oh my God, did I do all of my research wrong?
No, sorry. Thank you. Yes, Tennessee Titans have been allowing almost 33 points to the running back position since week 2.
Yep. All right, we move on to the wide receivers after a small heart attack for Ryan there. And guys, I always mention this at this point in the show. Austin gives you enough players to build an Austin lineup. probably the right way to go about this, especially when it's me who's just swinging for the fences and $1 million every single week. So Austin's about to give you 4 wide receivers. Take it over, buddy.
Yeah. So first off, we have Lad McConkey. The idea here is I'm trying to find ways to stack with Justin Herbert. We saw McConkey get going a little bit last week. I want to see it a little bit more, but I think he's still a good option for stacking in a way to get different. That doesn't mean I'm not playing Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen or Quentin Johnston if he does play. Like I'm still doing that as well, but it's just a matter of like McConkey is going to continue to be the least rostered player, I think, for the near term. And we saw him start to get more involved last week, so Absolutely. I think he still has that ceiling performance outcome. But the point is, stack with Justin Herbert.
And you brought up Quentin Johnston might miss the game as well. So
exactly, Quentin Johnston might miss the game as well. And also looking at that game, I'm looking at going back to Jalen Waddle, who had a really great performance last week. With no Tyreek Hill, was getting a ton of volume and hit the 100-yard bonus. And so for me, like just taking a simple Justin Herbert, Lad McConkey stack with a Jalen Waddle bring back feels really comfortable to me. I think that will be play. I think because I have McConkey in that mix, like that is going to be a way to get different with that mix. I think there'll be a decent amount of Herbert, Allen, and Waddle stacks in that game. So just keep that in mind that if you go that route, which I think is fine, you need to find other ways to get different elsewhere in your lineup. But love going back to Jalen Waddle. I don't see a reason for him to not get the volume that he did last week.
Yeah. Speaking of getting different, haven't heard this name in a while.
Yeah. Well, so I was trying to like think about how do I correlate with Christian McCaffrey, and also how do I pay for Christian McCaffrey because it is very pricey. And I think so. There's no Mike Evans this week. He's still out, and Sterling Shepard fits into being the wide receiver 3. And we've seen him have these random pop games with Baker Mayfield. Like he is able to get there in a tournament setting. The other thing that's really nice for him is that he is only $3,800 on DraftKings, so he literally like doesn't need to do anything for you to get there. And so it's really just about like me trying to like find a way to correlate with McCaffrey and doing it with Shepard. And I think just from like a salary perspective, if you're going to pay up for some of the guys we've talked about already, you need to do that in order to be able to fit him into your lineup. Now, if you're not going to play McCaffrey, then you don't have to get that cheap. But Shepard, like he's like one of the few sub 4K receivers that I would be supportive of playing this week.
Yeah, probably the cheapest player we've talked about all year long, really, at that position. So
yeah, exactly. Oh, and the last receiver I have in here, it's the same game that we've already talked about with Bryce Young. So if you play Bryce Young, you should play this player too. But even if you don't play Bryce Young, because I could see Tedero McMillan getting there without Bryce Young necessarily having a pop game.
Yeah.
I think you should play him. He's only 6K this week. I feel like this is like the week where we get the McMillan breakout just because of the opponent in Dallas. More fun stats of how bad the Dallas Cowboys Cowboys defense has been compared to everybody else. Since week 2, the Dallas Cowboys have allowed 53.5 points to opposing receivers. That is 11 points more than the second worst team and the New York Giants, who have allowed just 42.5 points to receivers since week 2. So once again, the gap between the Dallas Cowboys at 1 and the New York Giants at 2 is the same as the gap between the New York Giants at 2 and the New York Jets at 24.
Wow.
They are awful against receivers, and I'm going to play Tedero McMillan as a result.
And as am I often. This section took me a little time as well, and you've touched on some of the players I was considering, but I do think, again, almost Ashton Genty-esque, there's a player flying under the radar who's gotten better over the last couple of weeks, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr., who is still very inexpensive, $5,300 on DraftKings, only $6,900 on FanDuel. He is the wide receiver 22 in the season, but if you've been paying attention, he's been getting better since they've lost their running game. Over the last 2 games, he's the wide receiver 12 in fantasy. I expect the Colts to be ahead most of this game, and Arizona is going to need to throw. And that's kind of been the story of the Colts season. They are giving up the third most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 3 games. Obviously nowhere near Dallas, as Austin has pointed out. But Austin, another thing I do because of you, I went and looked at why they're giving up those points, and it's easy to be like, yeah, Puka Nacua killed him. But guess what? So did Tutu Atwell. So did Devontae Adams, all in the same game. But so did Troy Franklin 2 weeks before that. It doesn't take a Puka Nacua level wide receiver to beat them. Marvin Harrison is better than just about every other name I mentioned. He's not on Puka's level, but I think he's certainly on Troy Franklin's level, and I think that's going to play out well in this one for his price point.
Yeah, so they're the reason that I got in on Troy Franklin a couple of times there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like this pick. I like going back to Marvin Harrison. I mean, I think we're seeing them start to utilize him also more.
I do need to throw a big caveat, though, that I just found out. It is looking more and more and more like Kyler Murray is not playing this game, Austin, and I will immediately kill that pick. It just clicked for me. I did the show sheet at like noon today, and I just read not even an hour ago that it's people I trust on injuries are betting against Kyler Murray playing this week. So.
Yeah, I like the thought process there, though, and it's something that we should definitely be considering for future weeks.
Yeah, it's not something I don't hate Jacoby Brissett the way a lot of people do, and he's come in and had some damn good games. I don't know, and it's a revenge game for him. I may still find a way to get him in my lineup. I'm certainly going to have him in my lineup against you because we don't make changes, but it's interesting. Let's move on to the tight ends, Austin, because you have a guy who I actually mentioned in my paragraph. So I'll let you go ahead and talk about your guy, and then I'll go through mine.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Tucker Kraft at tight end this week, who is $4,700 on DraftKings, $6,700 on FanDuel. Again, ginormous price jump between the two websites. Essentially, there are 2 ways to think about this with Tucker Kraft this week. He can either be a leverage play on Josh Jacobs if you don't play Josh Jacobs, because I think Jacobs will be highly rostered given the matchup, or he could be a Jacobs correlation. I think people are going to lean towards playing either Josh Jacobs or Tucker Kraft, and playing both might be a way to get a different off the crowd, especially if Green Bay does get up early and maybe Tucker Kraft scores a touchdown or 2 to get there, and then they just hand the ball to Josh Jacobs the rest of the game, and Jordan Love doesn't necessarily get like 300 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I don't have my rankings in front of me. I'm pretty sure I made Tucker Kraft my number 1 tight end this week just based on the matchup alone. Cincinnati just bleeds points to tight ends, and why wouldn't you take that? Because he's still a value when it comes to cost. I agree with you that a lot of the best plays this week, even in GPP, are high price plays. So I wanted to go cheap at tight end. And I think there was a new development last week that you've already talked about. And that is that Dylan Gabriel is not that bad, but he also appears to love his tight ends. David Njoku is still cheap because he burned everybody for 4 weeks. $3,500 on DraftKings, a little bit pricier, $5,700 on FanDuel, but still doable. Dylan Gabriel targeted tight ends 13 times last week. 9 of those targets went to David Njoku. He led the team in targets. I was looking, and my notes specifically said this. I'm not sure that there is a super high upside tight end. I do think probably Jake Ferguson, and I do think probably Tucker Kraft, who you mentioned. My concern for both of those games is they could go wildly different routes. If Dallas gets out ahead because of their offense on Carolina, we could see them turn to the run, and we could see certainly the same exact thing in that game. Whereas Cleveland, I don't think there's a game script where Cleveland gets way out ahead of Pittsburgh. So I'm going to bet on them throwing. I'm going to bet on Dylan Gabriel loving his tight ends, and I think that's David Njoku this week.
Yeah, no, I really like that take. I think also, like, if I could see like Dylan Gabriel making his way into some tournament lineups as well, and so doing a stack that way, I think makes a lot of sense.
Yep. We got to finish these lineups with the defense. Austin, you got one? I got one.
Yeah. So this week, I'm going back. I think I've been going to the Seattle Seahawks multiple times.
Yeah.
I'm going back towards them this week. They've been very disruptive on defense. And this is also a little bit of a bet against Trevor Lawrence, because Trevor Lawrence, at least once a game, he tends to do something weird and turn the ball over. It's a fumble, it's an interception, and the Seahawks have been a frisky defense, and they've been really taking advantage of mistakes. So it's really betting on that. And also, they're pretty cheap on DraftKings. They're $2,700. They are more expensive on FanDuel. So again, like, FanDuel is like priced up both defenses that I like this week, and that happened last week. So I'm hoping that's a good sign that I pick good defenses. But all that to say, I think the Seahawks are a pretty safe bet to go with.
Yeah, I love the Seahawks because of my strategy, and that is the Seahawks have a good return guy, and I think returns matter now, and that's where I went with my game. I'm still chasing that special teams touchdown high, and New England already has 2 special teams touchdowns this season, and guess what? New Orleans happens to be a team who has given up a special teams touchdown already this season. I like that. It's interesting to me. The Patriots are actually a top 6 fantasy defense right now. They also rank in the top half of the league in sacks and takeaways. These are all things that make me very happy. If this were a home game for New England, I would be thrilled. Because it's in New Orleans, I'm a touch more hesitant. But I will say, it has been wild to me, Austin. The Jacksonville Jaguars are my stream of the week this week, and they are actually cheaper than New England. I'm betting on New England because of the return touchdown aspect of it, but if this were just starting fantasy defenses, the Jacksonville Jaguars are the number 1 fantasy defense right now, Austin, which is one of the wildest stats I've seen. But then the fact that in redraft, they're only rostered in 27% of leagues, and they're cheaper than both not than Seahawks on DraftKings, but they are cheaper than I think both of these teams on FanDuel right now. The Jaguars are. So I like the Jaguars. I just don't know that they have the huge upside of the Patriots, but for my cash games, I think I'm going to lean Jacksonville my cash games.
Yeah, no, I think they're a good team to go against as well. I mean, they are also a team that has taken advantage of turnovers. We saw them return
lead the league in turnovers
on Kansas City last week. So I'm totally fine with them and cash as well. And they have enough upside. I feel like you could go that way and turn each.
Yeah, I'm just betting on that touchdown. I'm going to stick with this return touchdown thing. The last time I picked New England, I mentioned that it was a return touchdown reason, and guess what? They scored one that week. So if they score another one this week, I'm going to be insufferable. All right, Austin, that brings us to the valedictorian shootout. If you've never tuned into this show before, Austin and I announced 2 lineups that we are going to go against each other this week. This is not the lineup we're going to use against you. We're also making these lineups on Thursday. So if one of these guys gets hurt, we're still stuck with that player. So you got to be a little weird when you're making the lineup. And we usually use a lot of players that you see on this show. Austin, I took you down again last week, 3 in a row. After you start 2-0, I go 3-0. It's going to be a season of swings. It was all running backs for me last week. That was the only reason I was able to beat you, is that my running backs absolutely went off. We basically had the same thing everywhere else. Just didn't work out well for you at the running back position. So this week I will again announce my lineup first. I like to always say this. Is this the first time ever? Every player on my team has been mentioned on today's show. So Bryce Young, Ashton Genty, Kyron Williams, Tedero McMillan for the Bryce Young stack, Marvin Harrison Jr., who's probably going to make it where Austin wins this week, Puka Nacua, Chris Olave, David Njoku, and the New England defense. So yeah, every player made the show. Actually, Olave may not have. I don't remember. I think he was on one of your lists.
Oh, he was on mine.
I thought he was. Yep. So every player on my team made the show sheet this week.
There you go. I also like it. I'm like looking at this. This is the other nice thing about us making lineups is I get to see what it looks like to have a different lineup than what I would build.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like your receivers. The fact that you're getting to McMillan, Marvin Harrison, Puka Nacua, and Olave. I'm like, oh, I really like that receiving core. It's like, do I want to prioritize that this week? But so far, for the contest between you and me, I'm playing it a little risky. I'm playing a lot of players that there's a good chance I pivot off of for my real lineup. But
yeah, so this might be the biggest Ryan blowout ever next week.
Yeah. So Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, Christian McCaffrey and Hassan Haskins as my running backs. And I'm going with Puka Nacua, Chris Olave, Kendrick Bourne, and Keenan Allen at receiver, going back to Jake Ferguson at tight end, and then rolling with the Tennessee Titans defense.
Well, the theme of the show, while that feels like a risky lineup, what you get from CMC and Puka Nacua, now I have Puka to cancel you out, but what CMC could do to my 2 running backs could be enough to bring you in this contest, as we saw before. I'll remind you guys for the last time today, you can play with us. Links in the description of this video. $2 contest on FanDuel and DraftKings. And Austin, we are getting our heads stomped in by the very good players who continually join contests. We might need to block these guys. Completely joking. Over on DraftKings, OTA top Troy takes it down with 192.2. This is his 11th win all time, and he is our top player on DraftKings. It shows that little leaderboard, and it's an all-time leaderboard. OTA top Troy takes it down again. And on FanDuel, it's ERT once again after a tie last week for first place. He takes this one down on his own. And the player we suspect may be the same player we're joking, of course, didn't play this past week. So he ties for the win and said he's done. He's not doing that anymore. ERT takes it down with 177.7, which feels like a lot over on FanDuel. That is his 4th win of the season, or her. That is their 4th win of the season. They are locking it down on FanDuel. If anything, if you just want to join one contest with us, come over on FanDuel. Only 2 people have won this FanDuel contest. We need some new blood in here to help take that down. Austin, that wraps up the show. Let everybody know what kind of DFS content you're putting out for Club Fantasy.
Yeah, you can catch me 2 times a week on the YouTube page, Club Fantasy FFL. We do the Thursday night showdown slates. That's me and Josh Hudson. We'll break down those contests for you every week. And then you can catch me and Ryan here every Friday. And then, of course, join our Discord. The link for that is in the show description. You can come talk DFS with us as much as you want, and as much as I'm able to respond to. And we'll help you set lineups. We'll celebrate wins together, and then sweat out our lineups together.
There you go. We put out 2 DFS articles every week at clubfantasyffl.com, though calling them articles is a little much. They're more informative. One is my Wednesday matchup report, where I do actually the same thing that Austin talked about. I chopped week 1 this week. So I'm giving you the top 10 matchups and the bottom 5 matchup against every position, just to kind of give you an idea to start that rhythm of your lineup building. And then I actually take the show sheet from this show and turn it into an article. So you guys are able to read that at clubfantasyffl.com as well. This show goes out every Friday morning. The next time Club Fantasy will be live is tomorrow, Saturday morning, for Start Sit Different Day. They spend an hour just answering your start sit questions. There's absolutely no agenda of the show. If you guys are looking to get start sit or even DFS questions, they can help you with that. Jump in there. They're there for an hour ready just to help you out. And then Sunday, we hope to help you set some lineups and win some games, build that bankroll. And like I said, come join the FanDuel contest. We got to beat these guys. They're making it way too hard. Thank you guys so much. Good luck in your lineup building. Good luck in the Millie Maker. Actually, no. Good luck to me in the Millie Maker. We'll see you guys next week.